All right, so then let's begin. Turn off the microphone. Okay. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining the third session for the Inclusivity Capstone. Once again, I'm Will. And if you have just come back from the Lunar New Year holidays, I hope you are well. I hope you are well rested. And if you got to see your family and friends, I hope you had a nice time. So this will be session 3. I just assumed that it will be asynchronous for the first stage, which is the evaluation stage. So sessions onwards up until I think the 5th one will still be asynchronous. After all, the 6th one starts to have different kinds of activities, so that will hold a different kind of schedule. Okay. So once again, the theme will be inclusion as and for future teachers. Once again, this is under the main idea that while we are also trying to make sure the needs of our students are being catered for and that they have a good place to learn and to develop, we as future teachers, especially as pre-service teachers, should be more aware of our own needs and being okay to evaluate how our needs have been met in the past so that it can help us get our needs met in the present and the future. So that's why this third session, the main terms are consistency, which I can translate as like having to do it very often or as frequently, or to do it almost every day if it's possible, or just very often, almost every day. And conducive environments, which is to say the place where you are learning, whether it's a classroom or somewhere else, it has to have the right things, the right conditions to make sure the students can learn well, that the teachers can teach well, that everyone involved can know that the environment or the place is right for them. The informal title is, oh, we have to do this every day, in terms of consistency of having to make sure the environment is okay for everyone as many days as you can. So once again, these main terms today will be conducive environment and consistency, or to be consistent. Once again, you can use any translators or look up any other resources as you would like. And I would like you to think about these two terms just for first impressions, for your first thoughts, any things or memories or ideas that first come to your head when you think about these words and what they mean to you. I'll give some time for people to think. You can pause the video now if you need to. Okay, with these thoughts about conducive environment and consistency, with those in your mind, think of what a good school with those two terms, what would it be like? What does a consistently conducive school, or what does a place that will make sure the learning environment, the learning needs are met very often, what does that kind of school look like to you? How do the students look like, or how do they act, or what do they do? What do they say? Or maybe what do the teachers say? Or what do the teachers do? Or what kind of things are needed at this place? Maybe it's in smiles, maybe that more people are more active, maybe they are not always at the tables, or maybe the teachers are discussing, or maybe the teachers they don't look stressed. Any ideas you have, just think about them, imagine them, and feel free to share your thoughts about this in the shared online space, in the shared Padlet. So I'll leave some time for the thoughts. Okay. Once again, maybe it's an idea you have or something you see or something you can hear, something you can imagine, whatever it is. Feel free to express it or remember it how you like. With those two things in mind, once again, consistency for the conducive environment. We will keep coming back to these two terms, and I will keep connecting thoughts about these two with this question, which is what needs to be done? For example, if what you imagined in the conducive school is something that has maybe a lot of smiling children or maybe children running around, what needs to be done would then mean what would the school need to do so that the children can smile more? Or maybe you imagine teachers are, they look less stressed. What would the school need to do to make sure the teachers look less stressed? What needs to be done? So once again, two concepts, and I will frequently connect it with this question of what needs to be done. And we can ask this question in many ways, think about those two ideas, those two main terms in many ways. So just remember that this question and those two terms will come up a lot. So we had the imagination place or maybe the ideal place. And now I'd like you to think of a situation that you have been in, preferably in Hong Kong. Think of a place in Hong Kong, doesn't have to be about education. Think of that place and then compare it to what you imagined. Like, can the place be more like your imagined school? For example, maybe my example of SKHJCYN, maybe I have memories of that school in Hong Kong. And then I have my idea of a consistently conducive school. I have to find the differences between the two and ask what needs to be done for the real life situation, the school I've been in Hong Kong. What needs to be done to have that school get closer to the imagined situation? Okay, so I will leave some time in the video for you to think. Once again, you can pause the video at any time and continue thinking, imagining, analyzing, evaluating the imagined versus the reality, the real place that you have been in. Okay, I'm about to go on to the next part. Once again, you can pause at any time. Understandably, even in my example, I could name a handful of things that a lot of things would need to be done for the real place I've been in to be more like the imagined situation. Maybe it's the same for you, maybe it's not, but for example, maybe in my imagination, teachers are not walking around and they have more breaks in their schedule. More would need to be done to make sure teachers in real life in Hong Kong have more break times and are not rushing here and there. Like my imagined situation, you could have a lot more ideas, a lot more examples, a lot more evaluations, right? Okay. So as we go to the next part, I'd like you to remember a thing that we talked about in sessions 1 and 2. These are, again, the words assimilate and integrate and include. Even though I see these three terms as assimilate and then integrate and then include being the best, maybe you define them or you understand them differently. But I just like you to remember your thoughts about these three words. They don't have to be very specific, just a rough memory. For now, let's look at integrate specifically, and we're going to try to connect conducive environment to consistency and then the word integrate. What kind of links do you see? You can think very generally, or you can think of a specific example. But specifically, what would need to be done to integrate students in a conducive environment at a consistent time? Maybe, for example, what would need to be done is that every day they would have to acknowledge that people of all different ethnicities would need to be there. Maybe a basic example is that maybe a Chinese medium school in Hong Kong knows that not everyone in the school is Chinese ethnicity, maybe not Hong Kong Chinese or mainland Chinese. Maybe they would also recognize, or they would acknowledge in what activities they do, that there will be new learners of Cantonese, and that maybe they should have different classes for those or different programs for those. And then there can be more activities for those who need to integrate to the Cantonese Chinese medium instruction school. That might be an example of how to link conducive environment and consistency to the idea of integration. That was just one example. Another question with this prompt is, what needs to be done? What is in the links between those? Once again, they can be very general, or they can be specific, like my example of Cantonese learning in a Chinese medium instruction school in Hong Kong. Again, very big prompt, and that's why there's a lot of ideas that can be had there, and that's why this is something for a bigger discussion. It's also why it's in the middle of the session. So once again, you can pause at any time and feel free to go through your thoughts as slowly as you need to. I will leave some time in the video for some silence, for some thinking. You can pause at any time, or you can skip ahead. Okay, I'm going to go to the next part. It's also a big prompt. It's also very similar. So we talked about integrate or integration. And now I'd like you to think about the links between the idea of include, or including students, including everyone in the environment. What are the links between a conducive environment and inclusion, with consistency and inclusion? In other words, how can one include everyone in a conducive environment with something that you can do consistently? Or how do you maintain a conducive environment, a conducive and inclusive environment, as often as you can, as stable as you can, so that it can be inclusive almost every day? Maybe for one example, going back to my example, SKH JCYN, where they try to include everyone in terms of Cantonese learning, where there are different classes, different stages where one can pick up Cantonese or continue learning Cantonese. There would also be many whole school activities where everyone can talk to each other. If not in Cantonese, then everyone could hopefully help someone else to get more familiar with Cantonese, or help translate from what a teacher is saying in Cantonese to a shared other language, whether it's in Urdu or English or Mandarin Putonghua. And of course, there might be some other activities such as Cantonese-based whole school storytelling. Maybe that's something that would not be as consistent, but would be or not a daily activity, but would be a good way to consistently encourage Cantonese speaking, not only for those who feel confident with Cantonese, but also for everyone who wants to listen to the stories and get more fun kinds of input rather than just Cantonese-led classes. So that could be one example of the links, or for example, the green arrows that I put there, the links between inclusion and consistency and conducive environment of a learning environment. So again, you can think of other ways, general or specific, about what needs to be done to have those links happen. Once again, I will have a moment of silence for you to think. And again, you can pause at any time. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next part now. Whatever thoughts you have or examples you have, feel free to share them again. Okay, so if you remember earlier, I asked you to imagine a very consistent and conducive environment. And at the time, I didn't say it had to be in Hong Kong. And you would also remember earlier, I asked you to compare a real life place that you've been in Hong Kong and then try to compare that to your imagined conducive and inclusive environment. Now I'd like you to think about a real life example that was anywhere close to your imagined idea of a conducive and inclusive environment, or alternatively, a place that has some features of what you recognized, some features that you thought about when you were thinking about the earlier prompt of what needs to be done to connect inclusion and conducive environment, inclusion and consistency. Now I'd like you to think of a specific example, preferably a place in Hong Kong, preferably something to do with education, but once again, it could be anywhere. Could be any place where you maybe learn something new. Doesn't have to be in a school or a tutoring session, or again, doesn't have to be education based. Just which place in Hong Kong was close to being conducive and inclusive? What real life place is this? Feel free to name the place in the shared Padlet, or maybe you can just preferably not keep it to yourself, because I'd also like to know the place, but just keep thinking about that place. Try to think of how many traits of inclusion or conducive environment consistency, which traits can you name for it? Once again, it doesn't have to be education. My closest examples right now are still me talking to close friends or talking directly with a professor. And that may not inherently be like very normal or that education based, but that is my closest example to a conducive and inclusive environment with some level of consistency. And that was just the closest examples I have. And if you really can't think of an example, hopefully we can later. All right. For now, I'm going to go to the next part. Again, keep your thoughts, try to remember everything. And once again, you can pause at any time. You'll remember that I keep asking what needs to be done. And truly, that's all there is to it. Especially as I was developing this project and this workshop group, the whole thing that I'm hoping to help everyone think about is what needs to be done to include everyone's needs, to include everyone's very diverse needs that might be very complex, especially if one aspect switches to the other. And also, if your example of a conducive environment is not necessarily in education or not necessarily in Hong Kong, then what are we as pre-service teachers in Hong Kong or hoping to stay in Hong Kong after our university training? What would need to be done to make the place more accepting of the students' needs as complex beings, of our needs as complex human beings that are about to teach people that are also complex human beings? So what really needs to be done to be inclusive? What needs to be done that can be consistent, that can be done almost every day and therefore not very impossible to do? That really is the biggest question and a very complex question that can be asked over and over again. But again, that's what the whole point of the first sessions are, just to imagine, even if not really think of it in a concrete way, to at least start imagining what needs to be done to get closer to that imagined inclusive place. For now, that's the end of the third session. Sessions 4 and 5 will involve a lot more evaluation and even if not difficult questions, or they might be more specific. So once again, keep your thoughts, collect your thoughts throughout this entire workshop. And until session 5, they will really be about collecting ideas, if not only for yourself when you go through this self-paced learning project, hopefully that you can share them as well. I've been trying to demonstrate me sharing my ideas, especially because I know that for some people they might need more specific examples if they can't really think of anything immediately. So I'm hoping that as this goes on, you feel more comfortable to either share it maybe in the Padlet or the YouTube comments or however you wish to go about it. So once again, that was the end of session 3, which was really based on these two concepts, consistency and conducive environment, and this big question, what needs to be done? So for now, that's it, and I will see you in session 4. Thank you again for joining. See you soon.